Okay, good morning, Year 9. So just some kind of admin notices to begin with. First of all, if you didn't notice it in my Manage Back post, I'm actually going to be at a medical appointment while this lesson is happening. So I won't be available on Zoom at this time. If you find anything difficult, you need to double check anything with me, just send me an email and I'll check my emails when I return from the hospital, and then I can get back to you as soon as possible. You'll notice as an attachment on a Manage Back a worksheet basically with all the activities from this class. So you could just print that off and use that to complete the activities. Do not worry if you don't have access to a printer. You're more than welcome to just make the notes in your exercise book. So it's definitely possible to complete all tasks without the worksheets. So we're looking at Romeo and Juliet. I know we started this, I think we just started this first part. So I'm going to go from the beginning just in case people weren't in or we need a little refresher. So have a look at the beginning, have a look at Act 3, Scene 3. Look at this quotation, okay? We're going to focus on interaction between Friar Lawrence and Romeo. As a reminder, Romeo has just duelled with Tybalt and killed him, and Princess Scalus has now banished him. Romeo is just about to find this out, and this is what he says. Ha, banishment, be merciful, say death, for exile has more terror in his luck, much more than death. So take 5 minutes, please. Make sure you write the date and the title, and consider the question. Why does Romeo feel that banishment is worse than death? If you have time left over from your 5 minutes, have a think about the challenge question. What structural technique is being used in Romeo's dialogue? Okay, hopefully you've given yourself 5 minutes. It's okay if you went over. Please take your time with this. I'd rather you do it properly than rush through. So hopefully you came up with the idea that he feels banishment is worse than death because in banishment he will be without Juliet. So he feels like he would rather be in a state of oblivion than be conscious and be further away from Juliet and not be able to be with his love. Obviously, this technique, as part of the challenge, is foreshadowing. So this already suggests that he would rather die. And so we are starting to already see hints that Romeo is suicidal and would contemplate death to be with Juliet. Okay, moving on. Remember to pause, by the way, at any point to make these notes. So have a look at the next slide. These are some quotes between Friar Lawrence and Romeo. In blue is what is said by Friar Lawrence. In red is what is said by Romeo. Have a look through. Can you find the techniques used in the dialogue and stage directions? Some are used more than once. So just so you know, these are dialogue, the speech bubbles. This means it's stage directions. Okay, so and these are the techniques. Can you find them in the speech or the stage directions? Off you go. 5 minutes. Okay, so hopefully you gave yourself 5 minutes. I'm going to go on to the next slide to show you where these techniques are. So, first of all, we have positive diction. In other words, positive language. Diction is just a fancy word for language, okay? So we notice that from Friar Lawrence. He refers to the kind prince. He talks about actually banishment being an example of mercy. It's a positive thing. It could have been much, much worse. Imperatives are used by Friar Lawrence as well, with here, okay, asking or commanding Romeo to listen to him. We also have repetition of madman, Okay, referring again to Romeo as a madman. And he metaphorically says that Romeo has no ears, meaning that he's not listening. We've got repetition again by Romeo using the word death. And of course, this is linked to the technique foreshadowing that Romeo will eventually die. Notice the curt clauses. Now, curt clauses are short clauses. It helps not, it prevails not, talk no more. So think about how that affects the tone of Romeo when he's speaking to Friar Lawrence. And finally, obviously these are stage directions, and this is foreshadowing as well, the fact that he takes out his dagger, again indicating that he is very willing to take his life than to contemplate having a life without Juliet. It's just not, for him, life is not worth living without her. So, taking those into consideration, I'd like you to look at the interaction between Friar Lawrence and Romeo and think about what's revealed about each character. So I've done one for you. As an example, Friar Lawrence is optimistic. His positive diction highlights his balanced perspective and calm demeanour. So please try to link your ideas to the quotes and techniques that are used as well. I'm going to give you 10 minutes for that. Make sure you go through it all and really think about what is revealed about both characters. Okay, so hopefully you spent about 10 minutes on that and have some ideas. I'm going to show you some ideas I came up with. You may have some different ones as well, and remember, to get those really high marks you want to have original interpretation, so I encourage you to think outside of the box and have your own. But you know, these are others that you may want to add to your notes or refine your notes. So I have, as I said, that he's optimistic because of the positive diction. Friar Lawrence is also authoritative. Look at the use of the imperative verb. It indicates an urgency in Friar Lawrence's message. He's also the voice of reason. His positive diction and use of logic in his dialogue highlights a rational perspective. Now, this heavily contrasts with Romeo, so you might even put contrast here because we have a great contrast in character between the two. In contrast, Romeo seems suicidal. Look at the repetition of death. It indicates mental unrest and a serious consideration of taking his own life. He's also very dismissive of Friar Lawrence. Friar Lawrence is trying to calm him down, is trying to encourage Romeo to see the positives in his banishment, because he could have been sentenced to death. But those curt clauses reveal an impolite disposition. You might even say that he's been quite childish in this instance as well. The metaphor of having no ears indicates an ignorance to reason as well. He will not listen. And he's erratic. He repeatedly is referred to by Friar Lawrence as a madman, suggesting he is mentally unstable. And the stage directions highlight his impulsiveness as well. Think about him taking out that dagger all of a sudden. And again, that foreshadows the ending of the play. Please take time to pause, add any notes to yours. We're going to have a quick recap of context. I think it's important now to kind of remind ourselves how this links to the theme of masculinity. So I'd like you now to stop. You can always look through your notes if you have your exercise book in front of you. List the qualities of a stereotypical man according to an Elizabethan audience. So I've written one for you to get you going. Men were head of the household and made all the decisions, otherwise known as a patriarchal household. So I'd spend 5 minutes recapping all the things that you can think of that were in general expected of men in this time, in the Elizabethan time. Okay, so I'm going to show you now. Hopefully you've got a good list of your own ideas. I'm going to show you some things that I came up with. You may have some that I've overlooked. But if there's any on here that you don't have, maybe you'd like to add to your list. Oh, here we go. Men were expected to provide financially for their family and protect or improve their social status. So remember, it would be the man that would go to work typically and hold, especially of higher social class. Only men could have what would be deemed as important jobs. Men were viewed as women's superiors. Men should be rational thinkers and in control of their emotions. Now, there's a bit of a contradiction here, as we'll see later. However, young men should be prepared to fight to settle a feud. There was great expectation or pressure on men to prove their masculinity by stepping up to a fight. Men were expected to be detached in love, so as not to be overruled by it. So that kind of links to this idea that they're expected to be rational thinkers and in control. It would have been seen as a weakness, really, to be so emotional over something like love. Especially, again, linking these because women were seen as inferior. Why would you allow a woman to affect you so emotionally in such a way? That's the way they would see it. Men were expected to be ruthless, competitive, and dominant. I can't remember if there was any more. And men were expected to carry oneself with great honour and pride. So, thinking about those things, just take 1 minute to write down how you think how far does Romeo conform to this stereotype? So does he conform to the stereotypical man, or is he in great contrast? And for either reason, please write down, support your ideas. This should just be a few sentences, so 1 minute. Okay, hopefully you gave yourself a full minute. So you may have come up with some ideas here relating to, for instance, men were viewed as women's superiors. Well, we've already seen with the interaction between Romeo and Juliet that he certainly sees her as his equal, if not his superior. As we've seen, he refers to her as a holy shrine that he worships. So that would be something quite unusual for the time. Men should be rational thinkers and in control of their emotions. We definitely haven't seen that. We've seen a really erratic Romeo. One scene he's devastated over Rosaline. The next scene he's incredibly excited about marrying Juliet. And now we have this Romeo pulling out a dagger, saying he'd rather die. So emotionally he actually seems very unstable. Young men should be prepared to fight to settle a feud. We've definitely seen that in Romeo. He did try, and you might argue challenge, the concept of masculinity initially when he didn't want to fight with Tybalt, but eventually he gives in, and because Mercutio is killed. Men were expected to be detached in love. Well, he's definitely not detached. He's willing to kill himself over Juliet. There's an element of competition. Maybe that's what his tragic flaw is. And men are expected to carry oneself with great honour and pride. Well, in this scene, we see Romeo rolling around the floor, pulling out a dagger, crying like a baby, you might argue, especially the way he speaks to Friar Lawrence. Sometimes he seems quite juvenile. So I would say, especially in this most recent scene, we haven't really seen someone who is behaving with honour and pride. So you may have said something along those lines. Okay. So the next activity, have a look at how Friar Lawrence tries to calm Romeo down, and he does eventually because he comes up with a plan. And the plan is, you're going to go, Juliet's going to fake her death, and so on, and something will work out. Have a look at what he says. Art thou a man? Thy form cries out thou art. Thy tears are womanish. Thy wild acts denote the unreasonable fury of a beast. Unseemly woman in a seeming man, and ill-beseeming beast in seeming both. So that's what he says. He says lots more, but I want you to focus on this part. What techniques are used by Friar Lawrence And what is he really appealing to in order to calm Romeo down? Give yourselves 5 minutes now. Okay, hopefully you gave yourself a full 5 minutes. Here are some things that you may have written, and again, you might have some extra ideas that I haven't put down. So first of all, the rhetorical question is challenging Romeo's masculinity. Aren't you a man? Um, we have the repetition of woman as well. He's accusing Romeo of displaying feminine traits. Now remember, linking that to context, that would be greatly insulting. Men were seen as more important, more superior to women. Women were seen as weak. So this would be an insult, although very sexist for modern day. And then look at his diction of unreasonable and unseemly. It attacks Romeo's pride by suggesting he is irrational and improper, and depicts a man who's completely out of control. You could also highlight beast as well. He's not even human, so he lacks that civilization that we expect from a man of honour. So overall, you might argue that he's appealing to Romeo's masculine pride. Okay, everything that he's suggesting here, he's suggesting that he's being everything but a man. And you might argue it works, but not for very long. So, final 10 minutes, I'd like you to work on this example. I've written an example. Here's a clue. It's not very good. I would like you to read through it really carefully and think about the expectations of what you should produce in a piece paragraph. I know we've done lots and lots of practice. Have a look at this one. There are some things that are good. So in this column, you can write what went well. So what are some things that are positive about it? There's lots to improve. So I'd like you to list the things that you think should be improved or changed completely. That 10 minutes will conclude the lesson. We will start with this in the next lesson, and then hopefully we'll be on Zoom and can share our ideas before we move on to actually improve that paragraph. Remember, if there's anything that you're really, really confused about, send me an email. I will be back by about midday, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible.